Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF. We love to bring it to our audience, the organizations, the people that are in the courtrooms who are fighting for democracy, who are fighting for immigration rights, who are fighting for due process every day. And now I have the pleasure of bringing on board a senior litigation staff attorney who works with the International Refugee Assistance Project, known as IRAP. A major Ninth Circuit oral argument happened on Wednesday that has to do with refugee resettlement that involves up to 125,000 people that have tried for the last several years, most of which or all of which have been approved for resettlement until Donald Trump and the Trump administration decided to put an indefinite block on all refugee resettlement. Now, we've already seen, and we've talked about it here on Legal AF in the last couple of days, on Labor Day Sunday, we had to have a judge in the District of Columbia get 600 or at least 76 Guatemalan children in a refugee program, had to get them off a plane where they were going to be deported and removed in the middle of the night or at 1 o'clock in the morning to be sent back to Guatemala to have their refugee status revoked without due process or even adult supervision. And now we've got this case, which we refer to as Pasito versus Trump. And I can't think of anybody better to talk about it than one of the major lawyers that works with IRAP, this organization, Mevlude Akay Alp. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So we haven't really, it's a great pleasure to have you on with us. We haven't really followed that particular case that closely. I'm not going to say it slipped through the cracks because we're talking about 125,000 human beings who are refugees who have been trying to get reunited with family and come to America through a lawful program established by Congress in the 1980s, the U.S. Refugee Admission Program. Checked all the boxes, did all the background checks, and got approved until Trump took office and decided to effectively cancel the refugee program, leaving all of these families and human beings in the lurch, and he doesn't really care. So you have an appeal, but why don't you tell our audience, before you get to the appeal, the oral argument in San Francisco at the Ninth Circuit with a collection of 3 judges we'll talk about, how we got here, the type of case it is, talk about your organization, what you do for a living on a day-to-day basis for refugees and the connection to America, and then the preliminary injunction at the trial court level out of Seattle, I think, right?
That's right.
Up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say again, thank you so much for having me here, Michael. I'm really excited to talk about this very important case, as you so importantly stated. This case has massive consequences, and this is a really important historic program that we're talking about, the Refugee Admissions Program. And I just want to back up and explain what exactly has happened here. So on day one, this administration issued an executive order indefinitely banning refugees from entering the United States and unlawfully suspending the entire US admissions program, US Refugee Admissions Program. And then days later, the government abruptly halted the funding that is provided through congressional appropriations to the resettlement agencies that really form the backbone of this historic program and provide critical support services to refugees after they arrive in the United States, and also importantly help process them to bring them here whenever they're overseas. So our organization, the International Refugee Assistance Project, or IRAP as we're known, is a global legal aid and advocacy organization working to create a world where refugees and all displaced people have a safe place to live and a safe way to get there. And as part of our work, we bring court challenges to fight systemic issues that are harming refugees and other people in need of safety. And that is why, after President Trump issued this ban on refugee admissions, we filed our class action lawsuit on behalf of a group of individual plaintiffs, refugees and their family members, and several resettlement agencies that, as I mentioned, are really hold up this program to challenge the unlawful shutdown of the program. And we were seeking to declare the ban illegal and to have it halted, and also to restore that really important funding that is provided through the program.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. Sometimes I get caught up in talking about statistics. 400 cases against the Trump administration, 93% winning streak for the public interest groups and immigration rights groups like yours. And sometimes we lose sight of the human dimension here. Talk about, from your experience working so closely here with this refugee project and maybe your own personal background, who are these people? Why do they desire a need to be resettled as refugees? Why are they refugees? And then we can talk about what America's historic role until the Trump administrations 1 and 2 came in bringing and embracing refugees. I mean, it's literally at the base of the Statue of Liberty. I mean, that is what Emma Lazarus was talking about. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, refugees from their countries. Except instead of putting them into concentration camps, they put them through Immigration Naturalization Center at Ellis Island. And so we had a different approach to people that were yearning to breathe free, right? Talk about these people.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Michael. I think it's really important not to lose sight of the real stories and the real lives that are being impacted by this ban. And we're talking about tens of thousands of refugees whose lives have just been thrown into limbo. And I'd like to talk about our lead plaintiff, Pisido. He is a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He fled his home country when he was only 16 years old in order to seek safety. And he had faced years of persecution and had gone through years of extreme vetting and interviewing and background checks as is required under the refugee program. And he was on the brink of travel with his wife and his baby child on January 22nd when his travel was abruptly cancelled because of this ban. And he literally had the rug pulled out from under him days before he was ready to travel. And he was, in fact, so shocked and in such disbelief that this could be true that he slept outside the transit center whenever he heard the news, because he just couldn't believe that his travel had been cancelled after going through this whole process and after all of these years. And thankfully, Pisido was able to travel to the United States with his family just last month as a result of the injunction that we won in our case before the district court in Seattle. But it's really important to understand all of the uncertainty and risk that he experienced in the meantime, and also the fact that he's not the only one. There are thousands of others stuck in limbo in these same situations. We have people who had to flee their countries and now are waiting in third countries. Afghans who, at the behest of the U.S. government, traveled to interim spot in Qatar to travel onwards to the U.S. and are now stranded there. We have another declarant in our case who is stuck in Thailand, and he was also prepared to travel, and because of that, he had to actually undergo a 2-week period of imprisonment in Thailand as part of the requirements to leave that country. And he had started that process because he was expecting to travel imminently to the United States. And as a result of this ban, he's now at additional risk having gone through that.
Yeah, these aren't people that are trying to go to Disney World. These are people who are refugees from their own countries or wherever they're currently occupying, as you said, facing persecution, facing possible death and or worse, including torture. And this is one of Donald Trump likes to conflate with his administration all sorts of groups, right? The undocumented criminal element that's Tren de Aragua, right? But he makes everybody a murderer, everybody a violent criminal. And I'm not aware of any statistics that show that refugees granted refugee and resettlement status go on to commit violent crime in America.
Yeah, it's really important to understand that refugees are the most heavily vetted population in the entire immigration system. Many of the refugees that we're talking about begin this process years in advance of coming here. Typically, it takes 3 or 4 years at least to get to the United States. And they undergo intense vetting and security processing during that time. And these people are relying on the promise of coming here. And as a result of this ban, they're currently in a limbo. They don't know what to expect. They don't know if that promise is ever going to be fulfilled. And I think it's really important for viewers to understand, what's at stake here. This long tradition that, I think across political divides, the refugee program enjoys bipartisan support. It's extremely popular among communities. It's well recognized that refugees provide immense benefit to local communities. And we're talking about an administration that wants to get rid of that. I think it's just really important for people to be aware of the stakes here.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're able to join to brief our audience on it. So you're able to get an injunction, a couple of injunctions out of the judge in Seattle. The reporting of people in the room said that when the judge issued the injunction from the bench, there were audible gasps and applause that broke out. Talk about that, and then let's get to the Ninth Circuit and what happened on Wednesday.
Yeah, it was definitely a very special moment whenever the judge issued the injunction in Seattle, and to get that ruling from the bench. In the audience, there were a lot of the members of the organizations that support refugees locally, and the courtroom was just packed, and it was an incredible moment and an incredible achievement. And as just to move on, as you said, the government then appealed that injunction. And that is why we were back in court this week before the Ninth Circuit, arguing why the injunction should remain in place.
And it's not just Mr. Pasito. You have a bunch of organizational plaintiffs, including organizations related to the Lutheran Church. Talk about who are the groups that are prosecuting this lawsuit, this case. Yeah.
Yeah, so our lawsuit is brought on behalf of a class of refugees and their family members, as well as several organizations, HIAS CWS and LCSNW, the Lutheran organization, who perform really critical services to refugees and provide them with the services that they need after they arrive in the United States. So we're talking about, making sure that fridges are stocked, that they have somewhere to live, that they are able to attend English language classes, get jobs. And this is all part of the Refugee Act's provisions. The Refugee Act provided for this really carefully constructed system whereby organizations would provide these services to refugees to ensure that they become self-sufficient and are able to integrate into society. And that is what is at risk here, because that critical funding was halted by the government. And in addition to that, these organizations also process refugees overseas and ensure that they are able to come here.
And now we're at the Ninth Circuit. So the Trump administration tries to block the injunction on an emergency basis, and it gets pulled together at an oral argument. I think our audience has learned, unfortunately, the lesson that who you have on your bench sometimes matters. It shouldn't, but it often does. And so we have Judge Jay Bybee, a Bush appointee, Judge Lee, a Trump appointee, and Judge Clifton, a Bush appointee. And there was some interesting, I didn't listen to the oral argument, but I did read some reporting about what happened in the room. Seems to be that Judge Bybee led a lot of these discussions. What was you were in the room. Tell our audience what were the main arguments? What do you think gained traction on your behalf? And what do you and how do you feel about how the oral argument went and the bench with the signal they were giving off about where they may rule in this case?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I was in court this week, and I had the pleasure of attending the argument. And I just want to say that this panel, actually, the case was scheduled to be heard 2 weeks later, and as a testament to the critical importance of this case, it seems it was scheduled for earlier for this week. So I think that shows that the panel is taking this issue extremely seriously. Their questioning showed that they, were considering the irreparable harm that is being suffered by the many refugees who are now at limbo as a result of this suspension. And we're hopeful that they will move quickly and issue a ruling quickly. I think it's just really important to realize that the longer that this ban stays in place, the harms to individuals, the harms to refugee families, just keeps continuing. And it's not just the refugees who are overseas, it's people in the United States. Many of these refugees are coming here to reunite with family members who they've been separated from for years and years. One of our plaintiffs, actually, she was on the brink of travel also and hadn't seen her eldest son for 13 years. And she was about to, she had been informed that her travel was going to be booked imminently. And then again, as like Pasito, had the rug abruptly pulled from underneath her, and is now facing indefinite separation from her son.
So, can you give a little bit of the insider baseball? How do you think the hearing went from your perspective, your side's perspective?
I think that it's really important to know that these issues were really serious issues, that the court heard everything that plaintiffs put forward, and that we are really hopeful that we'll have a ruling soon. And it's just important to realize that this ban on refugees needs to stop, and we need to talk about it. We need to make sure that people are aware of what's happening and aware of what this means, not only for individuals, but also for this country's, historic traditions and the moral values that we purport to uphold by welcoming refugees.
Yeah. So when do you think they're going to rule? Based on, they sped it up. They know it's important. You've got how many people? I know at one point it was about 125,000, but then these injunctions got narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. What's the class size right now?
Our class is on behalf of all refugees and their family members, and the injunction was narrowed by the Court of Appeals to people who had approved travel plans. But we were arguing this week that the injunction should be upheld in its entirety, and that would impact all refugees and their family members.
And is that the 125,000 or so number?
So it would benefit at least that number, any refugees who are in the pipeline.
Yeah. And that's something, again, we'll end the video the way we started it. As you said, and I'm not sure I was even aware of it, this is the most heavily vetted group of migrants into the United States. And these are people that have already been approved by the Department of Homeland Security, right?
Yeah, that's correct. These are people who have endured years and years of waiting, of undergoing background checks and security vetting. They've followed all of the rules. They've done everything that is required of them, whether that be uprooting their lives in order to move to places where they can be interviewed or undergo the necessary checks. And this ban just throws those families into limbo, and they're now facing extreme uncertainty, not to mention danger and risk to their lives.
A couple of quotes from reporters that were in the room when the lawyer, you can give me your opinion about how you think this landed on the bench, when the lawyer for the Trump administration argued such cavalier language. It's sort of up to the president to determine whether the vetting requirements are met or not. According to people in the room, that was met with a certain amount of derision or suspicion by at least some of the panel, who questioned whether doesn't that constitute arbitrary indefinite stay and therefore termination of the program altogether. Bybee is quoted as saying, if the president has no intention of reauthorizing it, then why wouldn't we consider that to be a cancellation of the refugee program? Is that how you heard that?
So we're arguing, one of the reasons that we're arguing that this ban is unlawful is because we're arguing that it is not actually a suspension, it's an indefinite ban. And we would say that that there is no limit, that there's no clear way in which to measure when this ban could possibly end. And if you take a look at the actual order, the executive order that President Trump issued, there's an irreconcilable conflict there. It's just unclear if, given the fact that he has completely disregarded the policy considerations in the Refugee Act that was enacted by Congress, it's unclear when this ban could lift if those conflicting policy considerations that the ban is that the ban upholds are actually kind of followed.
Mm-hmm. Well, as soon as we get the ruling, which you can see how important it is both to, sort of our democratic ideals, what it means to be an American. I know your organization has offices all around the world, but the fact that you have to work so hard to protect the status of refugees already in the pipeline and approved just shows you what this administration is all about. I mean, I would love to only hear about the work of IRAP around the world, not in the home country, right? Where it's just mind-boggling. But thank God there are organizations like yours that are out there that are working so hard. We'll have to see what this 3-judge panel does. Our audience knows that if you like the decision, then there'll probably be an appeal by the Trump administration. If you don't like it, there's other routes. There's en banc appeal, all sorts of things. And but this is likely heading, I would think, to the United States Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I mean, I just want to touch on one of the points that you mentioned. Yeah. This is a historic program. We have consistently welcomed refugees to our country. And it's, as I've said again and again, it's really important to understand the gravity of what's at stake here and what it's going to mean if this program isn't upheld. So I appreciate you having me on here to talk about the case.
We're going to bring you back as soon as we get a ruling, and you can tell us what the next steps are in the case. We've got Mevlude Akay Alp, who is a senior litigator, staff attorney for the International Refugee Assistance Project, IRAP. It's an organization that we haven't talked much about on Legal AF, but we will now and continue to follow cases like this. We are very supportive of all organizations that are advocating for immigration rights, for civil liberties, no matter if they're Americans or they want to come to America. It's important that your groups are doing this type of work and keeping and fighting back against abuse of power by the Trump administration and the abuse of the separation of powers. I am so tired of having to do reports about congressional programs that have been defunded and otherwise destroyed by the executive branch that's supposed to be faithfully executing the laws, not deciding, under some national security emergency, declaration, which then they hope the courts will defer to in order for that. I mean, there's so many things that they're using: national security and war powers, and we're under attack, an emergency. Everything's an emergency with this administration. We didn't have these emergencies before January. I don't really understand, but we know why they're here. They're here as a ruse, as a smokescreen for him to try to get the most muscular set of powers possible, even those that are not allowed for in the Constitution, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, a group that we haven't really talked about is the Afrikaners that were let in. And I think that completely gives the lie to some of the arguments that are made in the executive order about the fact that, we need to imminently shut down this program because of security issues. Meanwhile, this other group is able to be fast-tracked through.
Because they're white.
I mean,
I'll say it.
It just shows that this is not an emergency, and people can be processed under this program. And people have been waiting for years, and we want to see the same for those folks.
Absolutely. And people know my own background. I'm a huge supporter of things like this. I have a personal stake in it. My great-grandparents and grandparents were refugees that came through on boats through Ellis Island, just like you've seen in movies and television. My wife won the green card lottery, something that will have to be in a museum someday, because people will say there was a green card lottery. Yes, there was people that got vetted and filled out an application, and you'll find no more loyal, patriotic person about America than my wife, because of the dignity by which she was treated in her immigration process. And the fact that we have lost that under the Trump administration, this lack of dignity and making people, scurry in the dark or be trapped in airports or in other countries, is just a complete undermining of what it used to mean to be an American. And that we have to try to reclaim it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's what this administration is doing is not reflective of what I believe communities want. And I believe, and there are numerous studies and research shown that this group in particular that we're trying to protect here, refugees, are a boon to society. They are welcomed into the communities that they join, and that people want to continue welcoming refugees. This administration's priorities do not reflect what communities across the political divides want to see happen.
Thank you so much for joining us and making our audience pay attention to such an important and historic issue. We'll have you back on right after you get the ruling at the Ninth Circuit. And thank you again. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Michael. It was great to speak with you. Have a great weekend.
And you're on Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button, continue to grow this great community, pro-democracy community, and slide over to Legal AF Substack as well, where we're doing things including live reporting at least twice a day on Legal AF Substack. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.